My name is Lena Hayes, and for as long as I can remember, the rhythm of my life has been tied to the rustling of leaves in the ancient oaks of Willow Creek and the quiet unfolding of petals in my small, sun-drenched cottage garden. I always believed in the gentle strength of things that grow slowly, roots taking hold unseen, a quiet resilience that the world often overlooks. Perhaps that's why, for 12 years, I tried to cultivate a similar patience within my marriage to Marcus, tending to our shared life with a hopeful heart, even when the soil felt increasingly barren beneath my touch. Willow Creek wasn't a bustling metropolis. It was a town nestled in a valley, cradled by rolling hills that turned gold in autumn and wore a soft blanket of mist on spring mornings. Marcus's family, the Prestons, were prominent here, their name etched onto the brass plaques of local institutions and whispered with a certain reverence. I came from simpler stock, my parents being a librarian and a landscape gardener, people who found richness in stories and the earth, not in ledgers and legacies. When Marcus, with his charming smile and ambitious glint in his eyes, had courted me, I'd been swept away by the promise of a life that felt both grander and, I hoped, deeper. I'd believed our differing backgrounds would be like two distinct threads woven into a stronger, more vibrant tapestry. I poured my small inheritance, carefully saved from my grandparents, into his fledgling investment company, Evergreen Capital, believing I was investing in us, in a shared future we would build tree by sturdy tree. For years, I'd navigated the subtle currents of the Preston family, particularly Eleanor, Marcus's mother. Her disapproval was rarely overt, more like a faint, persistent chill in the air, a perfectly arched eyebrow over a teacup, a comment about suitability so veiled it could almost be mistaken for polite inquiry. I'd tried, earnestly, to find my place, often quieting my own voice, sanding down my own edges, to fit the mold I perceived they desired. Marcus, caught between his loyalty to his family and his affection for me, often chose the path of least resistance, which usually meant a gentle suggestion that I understand his mother, or that I not take things so personally. And so I learned to absorb, to deflect, to smooth over, all the while a tiny, persistent ache began to grow in my heart, like a stone in a shoe, a constant, low thrum of being slightly out of sync with my own life. The invitation to dinner at the Silver Perch, Willow Creek's most esteemed and notoriously exclusive restaurant, had arrived on embossed cardstock a week prior. It was for Marcus's father's 70th birthday. The Preston family, it read, followed by the date and time. No specific mention of me, but Marcus had assured me, with a quick kiss to my forehead, "Of course you're included, darling. You're my wife." Yet a thread of unease had woven itself through my anticipation. Eleanor had been particularly distant in recent weeks, her smiles tighter, her pleasantries more brittle. The evening air was cool and carried the scent of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine as I walked the short distance from where I'd parked my modest car. The Silver Perch, an old stone manor transformed, glowed with a warm, inviting light, its windows like amber jewels set against the twilight sky. I paused for a moment, smoothing down the soft, deep teal silk of my dress, a dress I'd chosen carefully, hoping it struck the right balance of understated elegance. Taking a deep breath, I tried to dispel the knot of apprehension that had settled in my stomach. It was just dinner, I told myself. A celebration. The maitre d', a tall, impeccably dressed man with silvering temples whose name tag read Senior Rossi, barely glanced up from his ledger when I approached the burnished oak podium. "Good evening," I said, offering a small smile. "I'm Lena Hayes. I'm here for the Preston reservation." He ran a manicured finger down a page, his expression unreadable. "Preston, for 6, under Mrs. Eleanor Preston?" "Yes, that's the one," I confirmed, expecting him to nod and lead me to the table. He looked up then, his gaze polite but distant. "I'm very sorry, madam," he said, his voice quiet, almost apologetic, yet firm. "There are indeed 6 guests expected for the Preston party. Mrs. Eleanor Preston, Mr. Marcus Preston, Mr. Robert Preston Sr., Miss Clara Preston and Miss Nina Preston. And one other gentleman, a Mr. Davies, I believe. He consulted his notes again. I don't see a Mrs. Hayes on the list. I blinked, a wave of confusion washing over me. Oh, there must be a mistake. I'm Marcus Preston's wife. They should be expecting me. Senior Rossi offered a sympathetic, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. I have checked, madam. The reservation is specifically for 6. Perhaps. Lena, what a surprise to see you here. Eleanor's voice, melodious and clear, floated across the hushed antechamber. I turned to see her standing by the entrance to the main dining room, a vision in oyster-gray silk, her silver hair coiffed perfectly. Beside her, Marcus stood, his posture stiff, his eyes flicking from me to his mother, a familiar expression of discomfort etched on his face. He said nothing. Clara and Nina, his younger sisters, stood slightly behind Eleanor, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and what looked like carefully schooled neutrality, though I caught a flicker of something embarrassment, in Clara's eyes before she looked away. The warmth I had tried to summon drained out of me, leaving a cold hollowness. Eleanor, I said, my voice commendably steady, though my heart had begun a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Marcus. I thought. I was expected. Eleanor glided closer, a smile playing on her lips that didn't quite reach her cool blue eyes. Oh, Lena, my dear. Did you truly think this intimate family gathering would include, well, everyone? She let out a soft, almost tinkling laugh, as if I'd made a charmingly naive social blunder. The Silver Perch is so particular about numbers, you understand. And this is rather a special occasion for Robert. We wanted it to be just, core family. And Mr. Davies, of course, is an old family friend, practically an uncle to the children. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I was not core family. The carefully chosen words, the gentle tone, somehow made the exclusion more brutal. Other patrons, waiting to be seated or lingering by the bar, began to cast surreptitious glances our way. The heat rose in my cheeks, a blush of humiliation I fought to control. For years, Eleanor had subtly conveyed that I wasn't quite up to the Preston standard. My quieter pursuits, my lack of a significant family name, my preference for heartfelt simplicity over ostentatious displays. But this was a public, deliberate act of erasure. She had orchestrated this moment, knowing I would arrive, knowing I would be turned away, knowing Marcus would stand by and allow it. The humiliation should have been a searing fire, reducing me to ashes. I should have felt small, insignificant. But as I looked at Eleanor's composed, triumphant face, at Marcus's averted gaze, at the polite, impassive mask of Senior Rossi, something shifted within me. It wasn't a sudden, angry snap, but more like a slow, deep tectonic plate moving into alignment. A quiet, profound clarity. I had spent so long trying to earn my place, to be accepted, and in doing so, I had allowed my own light to be dimmed. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, letting it fill my lungs, letting it center me. And then I smiled. Not a forced, brittle smile, but a genuine, albeit small, smile that seemed to surprise Eleanor, causing her own to falter for a fraction of a second. I turned back to Senior Rossi. Would it be terribly inconvenient? I asked, my voice calm, the tremor I felt inside carefully concealed, to ask if Mr. Keller is available for a brief moment? Eleanor let out another soft laugh, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Lena, dear, really. Mr. Keller is the owner. He doesn't personally greet every guest, especially not uninvited ones. I met Eleanor's gaze directly, my own smile unwavering. Perhaps not every guest, Eleanor. But I have a feeling he might spare a moment for me. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes then. Not doubt, perhaps, but a touch of curiosity, a slight disturbance in her perfect composure. She had anticipated tears, or a scene, or a retreat in shame. She had not anticipated this quiet persistence. The air in the elegant foyer felt charged, thick with unspoken tensions. Senior Rossi hesitated, his professional poise momentarily ruffled. He opened his mouth to respond, likely to politely decline, when a warm, resonant voice cut through the stillness. "Lena? Is that you?" A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed through me. I turned to see Arthur Keller emerging from the main dining room, a man whose gentle eyes and kind smile I remembered well. He was in his late 50s, his dark hair streaked with distinguished silver, his suit impeccably tailored, but worn with an air of comfortable approachability. He was the heart and soul of the Silver Perch, known as much for his integrity as for his culinary empire. Eleanor's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she registered the warmth in Mr. Keller's expression, the way his face lit up upon seeing me. It was not the cursory acknowledgement one might give to a vaguely familiar face, but the genuine pleasure of an old friend. "Mr. Keller," I said, my voice gaining a new strength. "Arthur, it's so lovely to see you." His gaze moved from me to Eleanor, then briefly to Marcus and his sisters, a subtle understanding dawning in his perceptive eyes. He returned his focus to me. "It's been too long, Lena. What brings you to our doorstep tonight?" I gestured almost imperceptibly towards the Prestons, their expressions now a fascinating study in discomfort and dawning apprehension. "It seems there was a slight misunderstanding with my invitation," I said, my tone light, almost conversational. "A little oversight regarding my place at the table, apparently." Arthur Keller's smile didn't falter, but I saw a shadow cross his eyes, a flicker of disapproval that was gone as quickly as it appeared. "An oversight," he repeated softly, his gaze resting on Eleanor for a fleeting second. "Well, that simply won't do, will it?" Eleanor, recovering her poise, gave a dismissive little scoff. "Arthur, darling, it's quite all right. There simply isn't room. The Silver Perch is always fully booked, as you know. One can't just appear and expect a seat at such short notice." Her tone implied that my presence was an imposition, a disruption to their carefully laid plans. Mr. Keller's expression remained serene. "You are quite correct, Eleanor," he said smoothly. "The Silver Perch does pride itself on its reservations. We rarely accommodate unexpected arrivals." I felt a small pang of disappointment, a momentary fear that my quiet gamble wouldn't pay off. But then, he turned to Senior Rossi, a gentle command in his voice. "However, Lena is not an unexpected arrival. Lena is practically family here." The silence that followed was profound. Clara's wine glass, which she had just picked up from a nearby waiter's tray, tilted precariously. Nina's eyes darted between me and Mr. Keller, wide with surprise. "Marcus." Marcus shifted his weight, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder, his discomfort now palpable. Eleanor, however, was not one to concede easily. She drew herself up, a disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. "Family? Arthur, you must be joking. Lena is Marcus's wife, certainly, but to suggest she has any deeper connection to the Silver Perch is, well, it's quite preposterous." "Actually, Eleanor," I interjected, my voice still quiet but firm, "Mr. Keller and I have known each other for many years." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Oh! And how, pray tell, did that come about?" I allowed myself a small, reflective smile, glancing at Arthur, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Before I married Marcus," I explained, my voice carrying just enough for the Prestons and any nearby eavesdroppers to hear, "I had a different life, a different path I was exploring. I worked in the culinary arts. And Arthur was my mentor." A stunned hush fell over the Preston contingent. Eleanor's mouth opened, then closed again, as if the words had momentarily deserted her. Mr. Keller stepped forward slightly, his presence exuding a quiet authority. "Lena is being far too modest," he said, his voice imbued with a warmth that enveloped me like a comforting shawl. "When I was first dreaming of opening my little bistro in the old quarter, the Lavender Door, long before the Silver Perch came to be, Lena was there. She was fresh out of her arts program, brimming with ideas. She didn't just work there, she helped shape its soul. Her intuitive understanding of atmosphere, her delicate touch with flavor pairings, her belief in creating a space that felt like a genuine welcome, she was instrumental. Many of the core principles of hospitality that define the Silver Perch today were nurtured in those early days, with Lena's thoughtful contributions. He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at me. She was one of the most gifted, intuitive individuals I've ever had the privilege to work alongside. Eleanor's face, usually a mask of serene composure, was slowly suffusing with a dull, unbecoming flush. The carefully constructed narrative she held about me, the quiet, somewhat unremarkable girl Marcus had inexplicably married, was crumbling before her eyes. She had tried to paint me as an outsider, someone unworthy of their rarefied world, only to discover I had a connection to this bastion of exclusivity that she, for all her wealth and status, did not possess. I turned to Senior Rossi, who now looked thoroughly flustered. I trust Mr. Keller's word might be sufficient to rectify the oversight regarding my seat? Senior Rossi straightened instantly, his professionalism reasserting itself, now tinged with a newfound respect. Of course, Miss Lena. My sincerest apologies. I will have a place set for you immediately. He gestured discreetly, and a waiter materialized, heading towards the Prestons' prominent table in the main dining room. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "This is utterly unacceptable," she hissed, her voice low but vibrating with indignation. "You mean to tell me she receives preferential treatment simply because she once arranged flowers or stirred sauces for you?" Arthur Keller chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "No, Eleanor," he said gently. "She receives it because she earned it, through her talent, her dedication, and her innate grace. Some things, you see, cannot be bought or inherited. They are cultivated from within." The waiter was now discreetly adding a place setting to the large round table, directly beside Marcus. "Oh," I murmured, a hint of innocent surprise in my tone as I glanced towards the table. "It appears there is ample room after all. How fortunate." Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides, her knuckles white. "This is an outrage." I leaned in slightly, my voice a soft murmur only she could hear. "What is truly an outrage, Eleanor, is that you imagined you could diminish someone with such callousness and face no consequence." Her nostrils flared. "You are deliberately trying to embarrass me." I offered a serene smile. "Not at all. I'm simply looking forward to celebrating your husband's birthday with my family. Isn't that what this evening is all about?" Before she could utter another retort, Arthur Keller placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I will instruct the chef to prepare something particularly special for you, Lena. A taste of some new inspirations we're exploring." Eleanor looked as though she might actually choke on her indignation. "Something special?" Mr. Keller smiled benignly. "Naturally. With my compliments." She was seething, trapped by her own snobbery in a place where her power had unexpectedly been eclipsed. Marcus, still a statue of silent discomfort, finally reached for his water glass, his knuckles white. I caught his eye for a fleeting second, and in their troubled depths, I saw not relief, nor shame, but a kind of bewildered fear. He had witnessed a facet of me he had either forgotten or never truly acknowledged. The waiter pulled out my chair, and I sat, the soft silk of my dress settling around me. An amuse-bouche, a delicate confection of seared scallop with a citrus foam, appeared before me as if by magic, a silent testament from Arthur. Eleanor watched, her expression a cocktail of fury and disbelief. "Well," she said, her voice strained as she attempted to regain control, her smile as brittle as spun sugar. "I suppose it's hardly surprising that someone with your background would have connections in the service industry." The old barb, polished and re-aimed. It was meant to subtly remind everyone of my humbler origins, to reassert her perceived superiority. I picked up my fork, admiring the tiny, perfect scallop. "Service industry?" I mused, as if considering the term for the first time. Or the art of hospitality, Eleanor? The craft of creating moments of beauty and welcome for others? I always found it a rather noble pursuit. She waved a dismissive hand. Call it what you will. Waiting tables, kitchen duties. It's hardly the sort of experience one encounters in our circles, is it? Her gaze swept pointedly around the opulent dining room. This was the core of it, I realized. Not just tonight's exclusion, but years of subtle dismissals. It was about her perception of my inherent unworthiness, my lack of lineage, my past that involved work she deemed beneath her. I took a thoughtful sip of water. You speak of it as if it's a deficit, Eleanor. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected me to shrink, to stammer, to be cowed by her pronouncement. The quiet confidence I was finding, moment by moment, seemed to unsettle her. I merely meant, she continued, her tone patronizing, that it must have been a considerable adjustment, marrying into a family of our standing. Such different worlds. And Marcus. Marcus studied the intricate pattern on his bread plate as if it held the secrets of the universe. His silence was a roar in the sudden quiet that had fallen over our end of the table. This wasn't the first time. There was the christening where she'd forgotten to include my parents in the family photographs until the photographer was packing up. The garden party where she'd loudly lamented Marcus marrying someone without connections who could help Evergreen Capital. The countless Christmases and birthdays where her gifts to me were pointedly less thoughtful, less personal, than those for her own children. Each time, Marcus had murmured apologies in private, promising to speak to her, but the pattern had never changed. His inaction had been a constant, slow erosion of my own sense of value within our marriage. I set my water glass down with quiet precision. I leaned forward, just slightly, my gaze encompassing not just Eleanor, but Marcus as well. Eleanor, I said, my voice soft but carrying a newfound resonance, do you truly understand the distinction between us? She tilted her head, a flicker of wary curiosity in her eyes. Even Clara and Nina seemed to be holding their breath. A gentle smile touched my lips. It's quite simple, really. Everything I have, everything I am, I built or cultivated myself. With my own hands, my own heart, my own efforts. A sharp, indrawn breath from Clara. Eleanor's face hardened. I beg your pardon? I didn't waver. You heard me correctly. I saw Nina press her lips together as if to suppress an unexpected reaction. Was it surprise? Or something akin to admiration? Eleanor scoffed, a harsh, graceless sound. Are you daring to imply that my family, have not worked for what we possess? I let her question hang in the quiet air for a moment, the unspoken answer clear to anyone willing to see. Then, before she could launch into a defensive tirade, I continued, I didn't marry for a name or for access. I didn't inherit a portfolio of expectations. I cultivated my own garden, so to speak. And yet, I gestured subtly to the elegant surroundings, the exquisite food, the deferential service. Here we are, Eleanor, at the same table, breathing the same air, acknowledged by the same esteemed host. Perhaps the paths to such places are more varied than you allow yourself to believe. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, her knuckles a stark white against her flushed skin. Clara and Nina exchanged uneasy glances. And Marcus. Marcus looked like he wished the damask tablecloth would swallow him whole. For the first time since I had entered the Preston orbit, I saw a genuine crack in Eleanor's formidable facade. It wasn't just anger I saw there, or frustration. It was something akin to bewilderment. A dawning, uncomfortable realization that the carefully ordered world she presided over, with its clear hierarchies and unspoken rules, had just been subtly but irrevocably rearranged. She had spent years attempting to diminish me, to confine me to a role of her choosing, and now she was faced with the quiet, undeniable truth that I was not, and never had been, the person she had tried so hard to make me. I picked up my fork again, addressing the perfect scallop. Oh, and Eleanor. She exhaled sharply, a sound of contained fury. What now? I smiled, a slow, thoughtful expression. One should always be careful about underestimating the quiet gardeners of the world. You never know what seeds they've sown or what might eventually bloom. I took a bite, savoring the delicate flavor, but more so, the profound shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still there, but it was no longer solely mine to bear. Eleanor, ever resilient, visibly gathered herself, her regal posture reasserting itself, though a certain stiffness remained around her mouth. I see, she said, her voice a shade too bright. Well, Lena, I must say, you've certainly found your voice this evening. One might almost commend your newfound assertiveness, had it been displayed with a little more discretion. I met her gaze calmly. Perhaps discretion has its place, Eleanor. But so does truth. She took a deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes glittering. Tell me, Lena, she purred, leaning forward conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a silken murmur that was somehow more menacing than a shout. If you are so wonderfully self-made, so independent, why is it that my son continues to indulge your quaint little passion project? That charming Wild Bloom studio you run. Such a lovely hobby. But surely, it doesn't actually contribute to the household finances, does it? Marcus is a generous man, of course. There it was. The final, carefully aimed dart. The attempt to reframe my independence as a charming affectation, underwritten by Marcus's magnanimity. To paint me, once again, as dependent. Clara gasped softly. Nina looked down at her lap. And Marcus. Marcus flinched, as if struck. A profound sadness settled over me, eclipsing the lingering sting of her words. It wasn't anger I felt, but a deep, sorrowful recognition of how little she understood, how little any of them truly saw. And then, a quiet laugh escaped me. Not a triumphant, mocking laugh, but a soft, almost weary chuckle. Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. Is something amusing, Lena? I placed my napkin beside my plate, the linen cool against my fingertips. Yes, Eleanor, I said, my voice gentle. It's amusing, in a rather tragic way, how little you know about the foundations of your own son's success. Her eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I turned my gaze to Marcus, whose face had gone pale. You believe Marcus supports my studio? I asked softly. That he indulges my hobby? I shook my head slowly. Oh, Eleanor, you still see him as the great provider, the strong Preston heir, don't you? The one who so generously took a chance on a simple girl like me. The sorrow in my voice was genuine. This was the dream I had clung to, the partnership I had believed in. Eleanor looked from me to Marcus, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Well, naturally. He is the head of Evergreen Capital. He is the one with the business acumen. Evergreen Capital, I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Did Marcus ever tell you how Evergreen Capital was truly seeded, Eleanor? When he had the ambition, the vision, but lacked the initial, substantial capital to make it a reality. I paused, letting the question settle. Marcus was staring at me now, his eyes wide, pleading. That seed money, the very first significant investment that allowed him to secure other backers, to build the portfolio he has today, that came from me. A stunned, absolute silence descended upon the table. Even the ambient murmur of the restaurant seemed to dim. Eleanor stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, the color draining from her face. What did you say? She whispered, the word barely audible. I kept my gaze on Marcus, my voice quiet but unwavering. It was my inheritance, Eleanor. From my grandparents. Not a vast fortune by your standards, perhaps, but it was everything I had. And I believed in Marcus. I believed in our future together. So, I invested it all in his dream, in Evergreen Capital. I picked up my water glass, my hand remarkably steady. The early years were lean. My little studio, the Wild Bloom, wasn't a hobby. It was what paid our household bills while Marcus reinvested every penny evergreen made back into the company. My quaint little passion project, as you call it, kept us afloat. Eleanor looked at Marcus, her expression one of utter disbelief, searching his face for a denial, an explanation. But Marcus merely looked down, his shoulders slumped, the silence his only confession. So you see, Eleanor, I continued, my voice still gentle, but with an undeniable core of steel, Marcus doesn't indulge my studio. For many years, my studio and my initial investment indulged his ambitions. We built evergreen capital together. Or rather, I provided the soil and the water, and he tended the visible growth. I finally turned back to her. You've spent years trying to make me feel inadequate, like an outsider who lucked into your family's generosity. The irony, it seems, is that the Preston standing you hold so dear has been, in no small part, quietly supported by the very person you sought to diminish. Clara was staring at her brother with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Disappointment? Shock? Nina looked as if she might be physically ill. And Marcus. Marcus finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate sound. Lena, please. This isn't the time or place. I held up a hand, a gesture of finality, not anger. No, Marcus, I said, my voice firm but without malice. You don't get to say that now. The time and place was when your mother deliberately humiliated me at the door. The time and place was every single instance over the past 12 years when you stood by silently and allowed these subtle cruelties to continue. You chose your peace over my dignity, time and time again. I looked at Eleanor, and for the first time, I saw not a formidable matriarch, but a woman whose foundations had been shaken. She looked at Marcus, and in her eyes, I saw a dawning, dismayed understanding of her son's profound weakness. The golden boy had feet of clay. Slowly, I rose from my chair, smoothing the silk of my dress. I believe I've lost my appetite, I said quietly. Thank you for the enlightening evening. Eleanor's composure had shattered. You cannot simply walk out, she sputtered. I turned to Arthur Keller, who had been observing from a discreet distance, his expression one of profound sympathy. Arthur, thank you again for your kindness. Your restaurant is as wonderful as I always knew it would be. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. It was my pleasure, Lena. Truly. Then I looked at Marcus. A final, lingering look. Are you coming with me, Marcus? I asked, though I already knew the answer. His gaze was fixed on his mother, his face a mask of indecision and fear. He had never chosen me, not truly, not when it mattered. He wouldn't start now. Eleanor's lips curved into a semblance of her old, triumphant smile, believing she had, in some small way, still won. But I smiled back, a genuine, liberating smile. Because in that moment, I realized I had already won the only victory that mattered. I had chosen myself. And the seeds of my own future, long dormant, were finally ready to sprout. Marcus did not follow. I hadn't truly expected him to. As I stepped out of the silver perch and into the cool, fragrant night air of Willow Creek, a profound sense of calm settled over me. The stars seemed brighter, the scent of jasmine more intense. The dinner had been a crucible, burning away years of self-doubt and misplaced loyalty, leaving behind something clear and strong. I didn't go straight home to the house Marcus and I shared, the one that had always felt more like his family's outpost than our sanctuary. Instead, I drove to my little studio, the Wild Bloom, on the quieter side of town. It was a small, charming building with a trellised archway covered in climbing roses and window boxes spilling over with whatever was in season. Inside, the scent of dried lavender, beeswax, and earthy clay always greeted me like an old friend. This was my space, my creation, the place where my soul felt most at ease. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar comfort of it wrapping around me. I didn't turn on the main lights, just a small lamp on my work table, casting a warm glow over the pottery wheels, the shelves of glazes, the vibrant tapestries I'd woven. Here, I wasn't Marcus Preston's unassuming wife. I was Lena Hayes, an artist, a creator, a woman who knew the quiet satisfaction of shaping something beautiful from humble beginnings. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I found the number for Laura Bennett, a compassionate solicitor I'd consulted tentatively a few months prior, during a particularly bleak period. I hadn't been ready then. I was ready now. I typed a brief message. "Laura, it's Lena. I think it's time we talked more seriously. Are you free this week?" Her reply came within minutes. "Of course, Lena. How about coffee Wednesday morning? My office, 10 a.m.? I'm here for you." A single tear, not of sadness, but of profound relief, traced a path down my cheek. I wiped it away. This wasn't an ending, it was a reclamation. I spent an hour in the studio, not working, but simply breathing, absorbing the peace. Then I drove to the house. Marcus's car was in the driveway. He was home. I found him in the living room, nursing a glass of amber liquid, the television flickering silently. He looked up as I entered, his face etched with a mixture of anxiety and something I couldn't quite name. Exhaustion, perhaps. "Lena," he began, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I nodded, sinking into an armchair opposite him, not the sofa beside him. "Yes, Marcus. We do. Tonight." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Tonight was a disaster. My mother, she doesn't understand." "Doesn't understand what, Marcus?" I asked quietly. "Doesn't understand that her words have consequences? That her actions cause pain? Or doesn't understand that I am a person deserving of respect, regardless of my background or who I married?" He winced. "All of that. I should have said something. I know I should have." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, without accusation, simply stating a fact. "But it's not just about tonight, is it? It's about 12 years of should-haves." He looked down into his glass. "I love you, Lena. I never wanted to hurt you." "I believe you, Marcus," I said, and I did, in a way. His weakness wasn't malicious, but it was damaging all the same. But love, I've learned, isn't always enough. Respect is vital. Partnership is vital. And somewhere along the way, we lost those things. Or perhaps, we never truly built them on solid ground. I took a deep breath. The money I invested in Evergreen Capital, it was always meant to be a joint venture, a foundation for our life. But it became your company, your success, and I became an accessory to that success, at least in your family's eyes, and perhaps even in yours at times. He looked up, his eyes pleading. "That's not true. I always valued your support, your belief in me." "Then why," I asked gently, "did you never correct your mother's narrative? Why did you allow her, and by extension, others, to believe I was simply along for the ride, benefiting from your hard work?" He had no answer, only a deepening misery in his expression. "I'm going to be meeting with Laura Bennett on Wednesday," I said, my voice calm. "I think it's time we discussed a formal separation, Marcus." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock, then a dawning fear. "Separation? Lena, no. We can fix this. I can talk to Mother. I can make things right. Can you, Marcus?" I asked softly. "Can you truly change the ingrained patterns of a lifetime, both hers and yours?" "I've waited a long time for that. I don't think I can wait any longer. Not without losing myself completely." The fight seemed to drain out of him. "So, this is it?" he whispered. "You're just giving up on us?" "No, Marcus," I said, a profound sadness in my voice. "I'm not giving up. I'm finally choosing to cultivate my own garden in soil where I know I can thrive. I need to do this for myself." I spoke of the cottage I had inherited from my Aunt Susan, a small, slightly ramshackle place on the outskirts of Willow Creek, surrounded by an overgrown but promising garden. It was legally mine, kept separate throughout our marriage. "I'll be moving into Aunt Susan's cottage. It needs a lot of work, but it's mine." He looked at me, a dawning understanding of the financial implications beginning to surface. "And Evergreen Capital? Your initial investment. Yes, I affirmed. That will need to be addressed fairly, Marcus. It represents my contribution, my security. It was never a gift. It was an investment in a shared future. Since that future is no longer shared, it needs to be returned with its due growth. I wasn't demanding a hostile takeover or to strip him bare. I simply wanted what was rightfully mine, what would allow me to build my own life independently. He stared at me, the confident businessman, suddenly looking like a lost boy. The power dynamic, so long skewed, had finally found a new, more equitable balance. He had relied on my quiet strength, my unwavering support, my financial contribution, for far longer and far more deeply than he had ever acknowledged, perhaps even to himself. A month later, the legal agreements were being finalized. It hadn't been acrimonious, more a sorrowful unraveling. Marcus, faced with the undeniable paper trail of my initial investment and its crucial role in Evergreen's genesis, had been advised by his own lawyers to be fair. Eleanor had, I heard through Clara, who had called, surprisingly, to offer a quiet, hesitant apology for her own passivity, been incandescent with rage, then sunk into a bewildered silence. The world she knew had been irrevocably altered. I sat on the porch of Aunt Susan's cottage, a mug of herbal tea warming my hands. The garden was still a chaotic riot of weeds and overgrown shrubs, but here and there, green shoots of new life were emerging where I had begun to clear and plant. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of damp earth and the promise of spring. My studio, the Wild Bloom, was flourishing, buoyed by a new sense of purpose and a modest, but steady stream of local support. My phone buzzed with a message. It was Marcus. "Lena, I'm at the old house. It feels empty. I've been thinking a lot. About everything. Maybe I'm starting to understand. I hope you're okay." I read the message, a gentle ache in my heart, but no regret. I typed back a simple reply, "I am okay, Marcus. I'm finding my way. I hope you find yours too." I didn't offer false hope, no hint of reconciliation. But there was no bitterness either. Just a quiet acknowledgement of separate paths, separate healings. Arthur Keller had sent me a beautiful climbing rose for the cottage garden, a variety called New Dawn. As I looked at its tightly furled buds, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won. But I had learned that true strength isn't about enduring silently. It's about finding the courage to cultivate your own space, to set healthy boundaries, and to allow your own unique light to shine, even if it means stepping out of the shadows of others' expectations. The soil here was good. And I, Lena Hayes, was finally ready to bloom.